Chapter 107. As Rimuru returned to the forest, he ordered Geld to gather 30,000 orcs to come and work as the main labor force for the construction. Geld explained that he would ensure orcs from all settlements were brought in, not only to make sure everyone contributed, but also to lessen the mouths that needed to be fed. He asked Rimuru to wait patiently, as Geld would likely send the orcs in batches of a few thousand every few days. This was due to the necessary procedures and explanations he and the chiefs had to give their brethren. Additionally, they had to consider the physical capabilities of the orcs, as Rimuru had specifically instructed that they would be laborers for construction. Geld made sure to select those with experience in crafting and construction. The Orbic population had surpassed 100,000, and, despite the recent famine, their birth rates had slightly increased. Originally, they had fewer than 100,000 orcs, but the looming threat of aggressors, though contained, had led to an increase in their numbers over the years, by tens of thousands. Welcoming 30,000 orcs into the forest was a blessing in many ways, and they knew Rimuru had done it intentionally. This only strengthened their gratitude and loyalty to their soon-to-be master. With most of the construction completed, and the castle now under construction, things were progressing smoothly. In fact, Kaijin was surprised to see that they were ahead of schedule by at least a day or two. To think a few thousand orcs can make such a difference, he murmured as he observed the orcs at work, carrying large metal beams and hauling massive blocks of stone to be smashed and processed. If trained, they could rival my department back home. Rimuru nodded with satisfaction. He watched as the area around the ogre village, once cleared, had now transformed into a full-scale city with buildings and streets. The ogre village itself retained some of its original housing and structures, now serving as the east section of the city. The rest of the area remained spacious, with houses well separated. Even before Benimaru or the other fair Onus arrived, the village had already begun to develop agricultural techniques. The openness and expanse of the village were designed intentionally to provide space for farming and minor animal husbandry, Rimuru had declared when they were still clearing the land. The east section will be where most of the crops will be planted. We'll extend the length of the village to increase the available land. While those competent in agriculture will do the farming, the ogres and Kijin who own the land will manage it. Since the monsters in the forest didn't yet have the concept of currency, they had always relied on bartering or contributing to the settlements they lived in, with the leader allocating resources as needed. Rimuru had tasked Rigurd with managing this aspect and other administrative duties, while Benimaru was in charge of building their military strength. Rimuru turned his attention to the large door being constructed where the garden of the castle would be. Near the flowers and trees should be good, right? He asked, turning to the dryads, who all nodded in agreement, pleased with how the door had turned out. The door's intricate details depicted the cycle of Ramiriz's reincarnation, the sacrifices she had made, and her role in the world. Though only vaguely done to keep such private information confidential, the door's beauty drew the attention and admiration of those who understood its meaning as well as those who did not. Velgrind appeared behind Rimuru, her arms wrapping around his neck, her face resting beside his. Ramiris should be arriving any moment now, she said. As if on cue, the door began to open, and the details of the artwork began to glow with bright light. The workers nearby watched in awe as the door slowly opened fully. The first to step through was a dryad with long green hair, similar to the other 100 dryads eagerly awaiting their queen and master's arrival. They welcomed her with open arms. Trainee, Rimuru greeted, and she returned his greeting with a smile. Then, a bright light flashed past Trainee and latched onto Rimuru's face. The workers gasped, fearing Rimuru's anger for such disrespect, but Rimuru simply allowed the bright light to embrace his face. What took so long, Rimuru? Ramiris exclaimed as the light withdrew from his face. She landed in Trainee's raised hands, which aligned Rimuru and Ramiris's gaze. You told me it wouldn't take long, but it took almost 2 weeks. Ramiris huffed, crossing her arms and looking away in a childish manner. That's my bad, Rimuru chuckled. Anyway, you're here now. And your dryads have been a great help these past few days. Ramiris flew out of Trainee's hands and darted toward the dryads, who eagerly awaited her arrival. How's everyone been? Rimuru didn't do anything bad to you, did he? Don't worry, Ramiris, Velgrind reassured her from behind Rimuru. I've been keeping an eye on him. She tightened her arms around his neck, squeezing him a little tighter. Rimuru rolled his eyes. He grabbed her arms and turned around. Despite Velgrind's arms still locked around his neck, their faces were now only inches apart. Really now? Rimuru raised an eyebrow, his tone teasing as he leaned in slightly, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. Valgryn's gaze was playful as she tightened her grip around his neck. Yes, I've got my eye on you, she replied, her voice low and teasing. Rimuru tilted his head, a chuckle escaping him. How close? As close as I want, she answered, her arms tightening just enough to pull him a little closer. Ever since he was born, he had always been more than an ordinary orc. From what he was told as a child, he was a unique monster, something rarely born from any race. He never truly understood what that meant, all he knew was that he had the ability to regenerate since birth. The way he discovered it wasn't gruesome, only a small injury, a tiny cut on his arm that drew blood when he was still young. His friends and he watched as the wound began to close, and the adults explained the ability. Geld became the king of the orcs when his parents died due to the sudden, unnatural movements of magical beasts from the forest. From what they gathered after the tragedy, one of the rumored Kijin race that lived in the forest had hunted a little too close to the edge and caused a domino effect, causing all the beasts in the vicinity to leave their territories. He got older and began to rule with the 10 chiefs of different orc clans who served under him. While they did, they were also his mentors and advisors for things he could not do alone. Even when the chief titles passed on to their successors as he grew older, he welcomed former chiefs as official advisors in his city, while still cooperating with the new chiefs. Everything went as usual. Their kind remained in their territory while providing the usual offerings to the surrounding demon lords for protection against magical beasts, as well as to ensure the demon lords didn't invade. He even had a family of his own. Unfortunately, his wife died during childbirth, leaving him to raise their son, a child he deeply cherished as the boy grew. One day, a surge of magical beasts, similar in appearance to insects, began to emerge a few years ago. They suffered heavy casualties, leading to small villages and towns being ravaged by the destruction. Geld was forced to take up arms. With his army of orcs to halt the impending army. What they had in numbers, they lacked in strategy, weapons, and armor. They were a race that had lived by agriculture, animal husbandry, and even gained proficiency in brewing beer, their specialty. War and fighting rarely occurred due to their strong sense of unity and camaraderie. As they battled the beasts, which they had labeled as aggressors, the demon lord Carrion and his army of lycanthropes arrived to see what was going on. Carrion invited him and the orcs to join hands to defeat the aggressors. As they did, the closer they got to the source, the quality and strength of the aggressors increased. It even got to the point where Carrion struggled to fend them off. However, as they approached the source, the number of aggressors coming their way suddenly grew fewer and fewer. When they finally arrived at what they presumed was the Cave of Origin, Rimuru stood there, watching them approach. Rimuru, what the hell was that? Carrion asked, scratching his head while holding his weapon in the other hand. Rimuru shrugged. I'm not sure, but it's gone for now. I sealed the entrance. You should have your people guard it, though, just in case. His words gave Geld a sense of relief, knowing that Rimuru had sealed off the monsters, but it also filled him with dread. He knew that one day, these aggressors would return, and his people would once again face their wrath. And return they did. Just a few years later, the aggressors came again, more devastating than before. Some of them resembled locusts, destroying not just everything in their path but also wiping out all plant life. The sight of these locust-like monsters feasting on the crops and leaving destruction in their wake struck fear deep into Geld's heart. He watched helplessly as the locusts ignored the orcs, leaving them to fight the other aggressors. It was as if their sole purpose was to destroy all plant life in the area. Determined to protect his people, Geld set out once more to find the source of the threat. His army stayed behind to protect the other orcs and eliminate as many of the aggressors as they could. Upon arriving at the cave's entrance, he realized he was the first to arrive, no demon lords, no Rimuru in sight. With no choice, he gritted his teeth and charged into battle. Fighting fiercely, he swung his axe, cleaving through every aggressor that came toward him. He fought so recklessly that he found himself in a frenzy, even resorting to biting and tearing at the monsters near his face. His mind became consumed with bloodlust, and he lost touch with his surroundings, his body moving almost automatically in the pursuit of destruction. His senses dulled, and his only goal was to eliminate everything in his path. So much so, when Carrion and the reinforcements arrived, they were forced to hold back, unable to approach him for fear he might inadvertently kill them in his frenzy. Less than confirmed. Evolution to Orc Lord successful. Greater than. The announcement was like a whisper in his ears, barely registering as he continued to fight. But it didn't matter. His transformation had occurred without his awareness. It was only when he regained consciousness, lying beside Rimuru, that he realized what had happened. Rimuru looked at him with a strange mix of intrigue and something like contentment. Geld sat up, feeling lighter and stronger than he ever had before. Geld, how are you feeling? Geld, the name rang in his ears, something he heard while his mind had been filled with bloodlust. The name and the voice that made him feel safe, as though he had done enough. He felt that the owner of the voice would handle the rest. That's your name from now on, Rimuru said with a calm smile. It helped you regain your sanity. It also evolved you. Further, Geld gasped at his words. The revelation lingered in his mind, but he quickly scanned the area. Demon Lord Carrion's subordinates were clearing the area, burning and destroying the corpses of the aggressors. Let's go, Rimuru said, nodding. We still have something to do. Dryads began to appear behind him and walked alongside them. Geld now stood, watching from his castle, a modest one compared to most others. From the window, he could see the vast greenery that, just a few days ago, had been barren. His hand balled into a fist. He stood strong in front of his brethren, yet even he was beginning to doubt if they could have survived the calamity that had befallen them. He observed as the orcs walked through the streets, and the children returned to playing outside, some being reprimanded for being too rowdy. It was a scene Geld would trade anything to maintain. Even if he needed to become a monster, he would make sure his brethren were safe and happy. Father, an orc bowed as Geld turned his gaze to him. The next batch of orcs to be sent to the forest of Jura is ready to leave. Geld nodded, and the two walked toward the meeting where the orcs leading the group would finalize everything. Geld and his son remained quiet, even when they walked alone in the hallway of the castle. Nothing needed to be said. Geld knew how strong and mature his son was. Likewise, his son saw his father with absolute respect, aspiring to be the role model his father had become. I'm glad you are safe, father, son. Such words were not needed to be spoken between them. Geld observed as they discussed the route the group would take. Since this was not the first group being sent, it was easier to finalize everything, as they had grown accustomed to the process. How is the procurement of rations for the travel? Geld asked the orc leading the group. This orc was a brother of one of the chief orcs. He volunteered to come to Rimuru to personally serve, repaying his debts, no matter how minor his contributions were. Geld knew the orc's skills and abilities. He was a strong leader for the group. We have enough food supply for 10 days of travel. The journey to the forest will take half of that time, and the dryads are prepared in the designated spot with extra supplies for the rest of the journey inside the forest. Geld nodded. Early tomorrow, at first light, you will start your travel. Understood. The orc nodded. Geld turned to his son. I'll let you handle the rest. He patted his son's shoulder and left the meeting room. Geld walked outside the castle, where his brethren greeted him. They briskly walked, preparing for the departure of the orcs heading to the forest. He smiled as he saw the joyful expressions on every orc he encountered. The adults bowed and greeted him, while the children came and played with him. He observed as the day reached twilight. He was deeply grateful to Rimuru. No, Master Rimuru. To be continued.